Just a quick question on your last slide. You mentioned there was programs and policies, and you mentioned that it could be led by a consortium group, the city and other business leaders, as well as some of the policy may be within city develop them.
Right.
So are they all within city jurisdictions and some of the economic growth factors and all that? So that's my question. And also, what were the funding incentive behind that, and who you see would be on the consortium and be interested in this from a local Vancouver perspective?
Yeah, so two questions. The first one, I think the focus we've taken is to look at policies and programs and recommendations that the city could implement that were within the purview of the city. But there will be areas where we advocate to work with senior levels of government on existing programs that will also further the green economy. It's really hard to account for in the numbers. So this was essentially mainly a presentation about the jobs and the numbers, but there's that 5% growth I showed in the green economy. Some of that growth will come because there are senior government programs to further the green economy. Does that make sense?
I'm just trying to understand how much do we advocate and how much is it within the city's jurisdiction to enable?
Yeah, we would like that all of the jobs that I had on that spreadsheet, sort of the 12,000, would come from programs and policies that we can measure and that would deliver those jobs.
Okay.
That's how I think it would come together. And then your last question was?
It's about the consortium group, as to who you see that in the local context in Vancouver who would be benefiting from having those programs and who would be interested in the consortium group.
I'm not sure I understand.
Perhaps I can answer that. That's yet to be determined. I mean, where we are now, we're working, as Juvarya said, with all the groups. So out of this process will come a number of specific initiatives, and the group that will be necessary to implement each initiative will vary. So they're all going to be partnership initiatives, because I think even though the city has considerable power, the reality is job creation is something which is typically done by a group of people. So, for example, the first example, or one of the examples Juvarya said was talking about emissions to attract other people. Mm-hmm. Now, we can do that on a city basis, but it's far more effective on a regional basis, and it's even more effective if it's combined with support from senior levels of government. So the question is, the broader and more, in each specific initiative, the broader the collaboration we can establish, the higher the goal we can create. But as you know, some people want to play, and some people maybe not so much.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Green?
Yeah, just wondering if you had looked at doing anything to facilitate more green jobs from home, so people could live workspace, or say if they're living in a condo, in a work area where they could have access to a temporary office space or that sort of thing.
That is something that we should put on the forum, perhaps. I don't think we've looked at quantifying that. I do know that Vancouver does have a large amount of very small and self-employed companies.
Perhaps I can explore that a little bit more. I'm not quite sure that sort of I guess, live workspace is a great thing, and it's great because it reduces mobility, so it makes Jerry's numbers look far better. But I don't think of itself it actually creates a green job. So it's hard to build that into the framework that we've looked about. So it is a green activity, it does reduce GHGs, but I don't think it's applied to green jobs. Unless, of course, it's so successful, you end up with 4 people in the same live workspace. But that would be as a result of other activities. Mm-hmm. So I even though I think that's green, I don't think it's quantifiable in the context of how we're doing the accounting.
John,
John, you just want to maybe quickly introduce yourself?
Sorry?
Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Maybe?
I'm John Tiley with VDC. I'm the Director of Policy and Research and Communication.
Other questions? How many people think they have a great job?
Well, by our definition, and I know that everybody's working on this, to the degree that you're spending more than 50% of your time on green initiatives, under the framework of what we develop, yes, you would have a green job. And so we actually have made an estimate in that of, as when Juvarya was talking about the survey process we go through, and we're, for example, addressing architects firms, we ask them how many of your projects and what percent of your output would you define as green. And we don't get into how many lead projects we go, but where I think the words we use are where the level of greenness of the project is significantly different from average. And they say, well, actually 20% of our projects are what we would call significantly different from the existing state of business. So then we would count as green jobs 20% of all the jobs in that country. And so we regard governments the same way. And I can't remember what the percentage we would use for the city, but I guess the number's getting higher all the time.
Other questions?
Then maybe it's accounting trickery, like, sorry, just for the accounting perspective, like if some company were to redefine their mission statements and redefine their job descriptions with green things everywhere, would that be a definition of additional green job, even though that you're not creating additional jobs, you're changing a job from a normal job to a green job? Would that be accounted under your accounting?
There's a separate section for traditional businesses that might do, their processes might be more green than another. For instance, Frogfile, stationery company, they only sell sort of recycled and non-toxic and stationery products. So those jobs may be considered green, just because if they're over and above what the industry practices, standard industry practices are. But those would be existing jobs. Those aren't counted under the new jobs created.
Okay, so the green job have one for existing category and one for new category?
Yeah, it's actually very difficult to differentiate in some instances.
Okay.
It depends if you want to sort of look at just macroeconomic growth or whether business practices are changing, and how many of those business practices are changing just because they would, or are they changing because of the policies that we implement. So it's I would say that they're blended. A lot of the time they're blended.
The reason I ask because engineering is going through this phase about redefining how we integrate sustainability engineering. So there are 800 staff in the engineering department alone, but is that considered in your number, or is that totally?
That's a good example because that's the idea with the fact that it is going to be contentious, and the idea is if we repeat our survey exactly the same way, we can at least measure the same thing. So this right now, I think the engineering staff are not included across the board. So there's certain job titles that would be included, but sustainability group, for instance, all the jobs are included. If we just continue to use that same definition, it doesn't matter if the department is redefined, so long as we use the same method. Does that make sense?
If I could just add one point. As Juvarya said, this is basically a survey exercise. So if there are people in the business of greenwashing, essentially they're lying to the survey. Yes, in fact, we will have our numbers inflated, but we try very hard in the survey to talk about how many of your projects, how much of your work is differentiated in your thoughts from the standard for your industry. And that's, it's not precise, but it's the best we've found to do. So if in fact we are faced with, and there always is in every survey, a little bit of exaggeration on the part of people, then we'll just have to live with that and just hope that the exaggeration going forward is roughly the same as the amount of exaggeration in the base data.
Okay.
Not that implying we're exaggerating.
No, but it's an important point. We're trying to make it as auditable as possible. There's some things we just can't control for.
Thank you, Juvarya.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.